were chosen by Jesus to be his apostles? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Mark on Walking Through the Bible.
Of his word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Mark chapter 3. We're going to be reading from verses 13 to 19. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Mark chapter 3, beginning of verse 13. And he went up on the mountain and called to him those he himself wanted. And they came to him. Then he appointed 12, that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach, and to have power to heal sicknesses, and to cast out demons. Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. And they went into a house. So far in the book of Mark, we have met 5 of Jesus' disciples. It's not that there might not have been others before this point. It's just that Mark hasn't mentioned them. We have met Simon, also known as Peter, and Andrew, his brother. We have met James and John, 2 other brothers. These 4 men were fishermen. In chapter 2, we met Levi, also known as Matthew, who was a tax collector. In today's reading, we get to meet the other 7 men who would later become known as the 12 apostles. We covered this account in our study of Matthew, namely in Matthew 10, 1-4. Verse 13 begins by telling us that Jesus went up to a mountain and called to himself those who he wanted. This is a detail that Matthew leaves out, most likely because Matthew, in presenting us his gospel, introduced us to the apostles before Jesus sent them out to preach, something that will not occur in Mark until chapter 6. Mark thus seems to be giving us a more chronological account of the calling of these 12 men than Matthew was. But he is also foreshadowing the fact that Jesus would give these men power before he sent them out to preach. Unlike Matthew, Mark doesn't call these men apostles directly. Instead, he uses the definition of apostle, which means sent. These men would be sent by Jesus out to preach, so they are apostles of Jesus. Who were the 12 men that Jesus selected? Well, a few of them we get to know a great deal about, while some of them we hardly know anything about. Whenever a list of apostles is given, invariably Peter is always listed at the top. Some believe that this means he was the most important apostle, but nowhere in Scripture does Jesus ever say this, nor does Peter ever say this. Peter, we know, is the most outspoken of the apostles and is the one who confessed that Jesus was the Son of God, as we saw in our study of Matthew in Matthew 16. So this is the likely reason that he is placed first. Peter was from Bethsaida, as John 1 tells us. He preached the first sermon on the day of Pentecost, preached to the first Gentile converts to Christ in Acts 10, and was the writer of the book of 1st and 2nd Peter. Andrew is Peter's brother, and according to John 1, he is the one who went and identified Jesus to Peter as the Messiah. James and John were also brothers, sons of Zebedee. Here in verse 17, we find that Jesus gives these 2 nicknames to them, referring to them as sons of thunder. James would become the first apostle to be martyred for the name of Christ in Acts 12, while John would be the last apostle to die near the close of the first century. James did not write any of the books of the Bible, while John wrote the Gospel of John, the epistles of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, as well as the book of Revelation. Peter, Andrew, James, and John could be considered Jesus' inner circle, as they are often mentioned of together, although it would only be Peter, James, and John who would see Jesus transfigured in Mark 9. Next, we have listed Philip and Bartholomew. Philip is not the same Philip we see in Acts 8, but he is the same Philip who in John 1 went and told Nathanael about Jesus. It is believed that Nathanael and Bartholomew are the same man, with Nathanael being like Peter and Matthew, a man with 2 names. Next, we have Matthew and Thomas. Matthew is a tax collector and the one who wrote the book of Matthew. Thomas is best remembered for not initially believing the accounts of Jesus' resurrection until he saw Jesus, at which point he believed. Of the next 3 apostles, we know hardly anything about them from scriptures themselves. We have James the son of Alphaeus, sometimes referred to as James the Less, possibly due to his height and to distinguish him from the other James. Recall from chapter 2, we found that Levi, or Matthew, was the son of Alphaeus. And so if this was the same Alphaeus, that would make Matthew and James brothers, and thus the 3rd set of siblings among the 12 apostles of Jesus. However, since Mark does not identify Levi as James the Less and as brothers, Yet does Peter and Andrew, along with James and John, it is therefore quite probable that they weren't brothers, but simply men who had fathers with the same name. We then have a man who is known as Thaddeus. He is also known as Lebbaeus in the book of Matthew, or Judas, son of or brother of James in the books of Luke and Acts. Following that, we have Simon the Canaanite, or Simon Zelotes, in Luke and Acts. That we don't know much about these three apostles is not to diminish their significance, but simply state the scriptures don't speak much about their work. And finally, we have the betrayer, Judas Iscariot. He is always listed last in the list of the apostles in the Gospels, and always with the epitaph, the traitor or betrayer of Christ. Prophecy said that one of the Messiah's followers would betray him, and thus a man with a heart who would do just that, namely Judas, was selected. With that, our time is up today, Lord willing. We hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Mark chapter 3, verses 20 to 35, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.